Your anxiety is not a death sentence, and your trauma doesn't need to haunt you forever. I've got 3 excellent books in a bucket that we're going to be addressing in today's video on healing the nervous system. There is a reason for the bucket. I haven't just completely gone insane because of my unresolved childhood trauma. But if you have got some unresolved childhood trauma, this video is going to be useful for you. I've got 3 books that kind of span the territory between body-based psychotherapy and interpersonal neurobiology, which is a very unnecessarily complex term for the study of bad relationships. If you've heard of attachment theory or attachment styles, that's some of what we're going to be going into today, but also it's this scientific nervous system regulation kind of stuff. But the reason I have the bucket, let's slow it down. The reason I have the bucket and the reason I'm going to use that as a demonstrative prop in a few minutes is that I can't answer a question like this on childhood trauma and the sensitive nervous system without making a very important point in metaphorical language. There's a difference, a critical difference between regulating and repairing. If we're talking about the nervous system, for the sake of simplicity, we're looking at the ups and downs of daily life as our emotional triggers and our instabilities take us all the way to the high heights and all the way down to the crashing lows, and sometimes on quite an unpredictable and volatile basis. Repairing means actually changing the very essence of this cycle, whereas regulating is more about damage control, symptom management. So let me bring out a wonderful metaphor with the bucket to make this clear. I'll take out these books for a moment. Join me on a story of theatrical ridiculousness, because this is honestly the best way that I can possibly think about sharing this topic. I've got 30, 40 books I could recommend. I could read quotes, but this bucket is going to teach the lesson, hopefully far more. So let's go into it. I want you to imagine that you live in a home in a stormy area. It's a stormy part of the world and it's always raining. It's an old home, it's been there for many decades, and over the years that you've lived there, the one leak in the roof, which was initially plugged up with just a bucket beneath, of course that's not the actual fix, but you said, okay, that's fixed now, I've got the bucket. That one leak from a few years ago has become 10 leaks. So you had the gratitude bucket beneath the one hole, and then when it's raining, the storm comes in, you get the meditation bucket, you put that there. You then get the journaling bucket. There's another one over here. You put the journaling bucket out. And over the course of the few years of you learning bucket management strategies, every time that a storm comes in, you go out and you place the buckets and you make sure that they're in the perfect place so that every single dirty droplet of water is caught and your carpet is protected. You develop an intricate and very sophisticated system of bucket management, trauma management, leaky roof management. And you know what? It works. You never get a single bit of water on your furniture. But what do you sacrifice? Well, if you imagine that you live in a very stormy part of the world and you're always looking for the buckets and always ready to put the buckets and empty them out and go through the cycle, you'll definitely keep yourself safe from the water, but you're going to sacrifice social life. You're going to be spending hours per day managing leaky situations where the energy is coming in, and you don't make the obvious choice, which is, firstly, why are you living in this part of the world? Why don't you just move to a different part of the world where it's not so stormy? But let's imagine you're going to stay here. Maybe I should repair the roof. That's the difference between repairing and regulating. You can regulate the flow of trauma energy, this feeling of suddenly very anxious energy, or very aggressive energy, or very sad and collapsy energy, like it were sadness, anger, rage, whatever it is, all these different holes coming into your system. Or you can just repair them. But that takes stepping back and realizing that repair is the fundamental priority if you're trying to heal trauma at the root cause level. And there's a few things that we can go into. I do have a few books like 8 Keys to Body-Brain Balance by Robert Scare. I've also got this book on the polyvagal theory. Hopefully we can get the front cover up. It's very beautiful. Polyvagal Theory in Therapy. Fantastic book, very scientific. And then an even more scientific book, Affect Regulation and the Repair of the Self by Alan Shaw. Incredibly scientific. We don't need to go into them. The number one way to repair your nervous system in an everyday sense is to do things and set up systems and repair the leaks in the ceiling, which help to minimize that inflow of trauma-based energy. I didn't fully acknowledge just how important it was to move environments, but that is a truly important element. We will go back into the books. I'm going to give you practical things, and if you're like, oh, this is just a metaphor about a bucket, please bear with me. I hope that this lands. Imagine that one hole in the ceiling is drink and drug abuse. Imagine that another hole in the ceiling is the bad relationship you're in, and the one over there is the fact that you live in a crime-based neighborhood. And then you've got another one all the way over there, which is your family member who calls you way too often, and you've got some bad experiences with them. And then you've got another hole that's developing, it's just about to start to develop, and it's your existential dread about the lack of ambition that you have for the future. Sometimes trauma is where we should focus, but in terms of trauma healing from a roundabout perspective, sometimes it's not about the trauma. Sometimes it's about your lifestyle, and the way to properly identify how much of your anxiety is because of the childhood wounds and the childhood traumas, and how much of it is because of the everyday lifestyle, which is clearly chaotic and not working for you, is to firstly focus on resolving and fixing the present moment situations, which may or may not have originated from certain behavioral conditioned responses from childhood. Let's imagine that you had a particularly abandoning family dynamic where you were never really given the kind of love that you wanted from mother or father. Maybe 20, 30, 40 years later, that means that you've ended up in a relationship with someone who treats you very much the same, or you treat your career the same and don't really stand up and take up the spotlight in the way that you know you could. You could spend 100 hours on psychotherapy, you could go into all of the books, or you could just tap into that deeper cognitive awareness that you don't need to do all of that to make the immediate shift. You can just go about ending the relationship or repairing the relationship. You can just go about the career shift. There are so many practical things that I could stack up and just give to you that if you did these things sequentially and steadily and consistently, you would get so much clarity, an unbelievable level of insight about what is the trauma of the past which lives into the present, and what are present moment activities, behaviors, and environmental issues which I can fix without needing to fully heal all of the trauma of the past. And that should hopefully be liberating. You can go into a wonderful practice of breathwork in the morning, followed by gratitude journaling, followed by a wonderful meditation, and then going out for whatever variety of stacked therapeutic experiences you want through a day. Or you could just change the environment that you're in and the behaviors that you have. Yes, I know that some things are conditioned from the past, but stop drinking, stop smoking, eat organic healthy food, drink clean water, go to the gym, the yoga studio, the dance studio 3, 4, 5 times a week, go for a daily walk in nature, have a couple healthy friendships, move towards having a healthy romantic relationship, have meaningful work and a sense of existential purpose in your career. And if you just did those few things, you would get so much clarity about what is the past, what is the present, because your present life is objectively safe, secure, and fulfilling. It's not easily done. I know it's easy for me to say in a video. It took me personally many years to go about the sobriety process. I'm 4.5 years sober at the time of doing this video. I've got wonderfully healthy relationships. I have a lot of meaning in my work. I get it. It's easy for me to say from this point of view, but also I didn't inherit this point of view. I worked on it. I worked on it through consistent action, and I want to be careful around childhood trauma being something which is effectively a shorthand tag for victim mentality. Anyone watching this video to this point has experienced childhood trauma. I've been there. What's the most useful way of us working forwards? It's empowerment. An empowerment perspective with a fulfilling lifestyle before going into the trauma-based work is going to help you to go deeper, further, and quicker with your healing process, because the present will inform the past and the future. I hope this is clear. Once more, just for the sake of simplicity, if you're spending all of your days getting the buckets and going to the leaks and not realizing that maybe bucket management isn't working for you, It's time to fix the root issues, and that's usually the time and the energy that you are wasting or misdirecting into certain relationships. It's the substances that you're putting into your body. You don't need to go all the way deep into attachment theory, interpersonal neurobiology, or body-based psychotherapy from a polyvagal approach to understand that you're in a bad relationship, you drink every night, you're smoking, you're eating bad food, and you're not going to the gym. Bit of a rant, but I wanted to be clear that it's ridiculous to go about this bucket process beyond the point of maybe 1 or 2 leaks in the roof that you start managing. That's the regulation. If you're regulating an unrepaired situation, that's okay for a period of time. But let's focus our energy towards the actual repair. If you're curious at this point in the video why I haven't gone into the books, I'm going to read you an extract from the end of what I believe to be perhaps one of the best books on the topic, affect regulation and repair of the self, but it is written in language which is very, very different from how I just described things. So this is a quote from one of the men, and there's women in this field as well, but a man who's particularly good. He's been writing on this topic for 20, 30, 40 years. I think he's the founder or the editor of the interpersonal Thornton biology series. You can see my energy leaving me. Just listen to this quote. This quote says the exact same thing that I just said through the metaphor analogy, but in a different way. A very scientifically dense way. Prepare for this. Real language, proper language, precise language, but I don't think it's useful for most people, which is why I'm bringing it through at this point. You can read this book in your own time if you want to really go deep on it. What's the point of therapy? What's the point of a body-based, interpersonal neurobiology-based approach to therapy? Quote, a long-term goal of reorganizing insecure internal working models into earned, secure models that allow for more complex modes of intrapsychic organization and interpersonal behaviors, and a developmental progression of the ability, in a variety of familiar and novel contexts, to maintain a coherent, continuous, and unified sense of self, a function of the right brain, the biological substrate of the human unconscious mind. This book is 300 pages of that kind of level of dense psychological language, which is why I also held up the polyvagal theory in therapy. I think it's by Deb Adana, and she explains the same thing in basically more simple language, but again, I'll bring out the quote and you'll make the connections. I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. I'm trying to make it more fun and more engaging and more practically relatable. Quote from the book about polyvagal theory, which is more or less the way that you regulate your cycles. Clinical work with trauma from a polyvagal perspective begins with befriending. Clients often feel like they are at war with their autonomic nervous systems and feel betrayed by their patterns of dysregulation. Looking beyond clinical diagnosis invites clients to see their behaviors and beliefs as adaptive responses in the service of survival. At its heart, a polyvagal approach helps clients release the burden of the shame that they carry. Fantastic summary there. We're basically looking at the behaviors and responses we have in the present day and looking how they're anchored towards the past, but also working in a present moment context. Continuing the quote. Through mapping, mapping is a term that the author uses in regards to identifying where our cycles are and certain triggers and behaviors and how to regulate those behaviors. Through mapping, clients become aware of the commonly experienced responses shared across human autonomic systems and discover the unique patterns that personalize their systems. Rather than a perpetual feeling of being too much, if you can relate to that, it's always too much emotion. Rather than a perpetual feeling of being too much, e.g. needy, emotional, volatile, anxious, unstable, clients can redefine themselves as having an internal surveillance system that is sensitive to cues of danger, and this is where sensitivity becomes a superpower. I don't lean into that language too much because I find that the way that people say my sensitivity is my strength, my sensitivity is a superpower, tends to be a little bit overblown, especially as a teacher on YouTube. If I start saying your sensitivity is a superpower, it tends to attract a bit more of a idealistic, naive impression, which sure, it is true, but in terms of that language, it's a bit too pedestalizing, because then you're setting yourself up as a superhero, and if you're a superhero, then you're also in child consciousness, which then anchors you deeper into 7-year-old thinking that superheroes and superpowers are a thing. That's me being picky with language. I just try and avoid things like that, but it is still objectively true. Sensitivity can be a strength. just a bit of a side rant right there. Anyway, noticing, naming, and turning, and blah, 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 blah. I don't enjoy reading from books like this, because even though they are fantastic, I don't draw upon them too much in my private work, and in terms of my personal feeling of regulating and repairing, it doesn't need to be that complex. There's another quote in this book which I was going to read out, which effectively reverses the trend of body upward psychotherapy, which is healing the nervous system to heal the mental states, and Robert Scare, who agrees with that, also countered the point saying you need to have a narrative and a story and an existential approach towards your identity which correlates and complements the body-based approach. Wonderful thing, but I think it's getting too complex for one video, so read this book in your own time. The point that I'm trying to make, dropping the bucket on the floor, is that it doesn't need to be complex. The way that you can repair your nervous system is by doing the things that you already know you need to be doing today to minimize those triggery responses and those stimuluses. Get rid of the bad friendships. Get rid of the bad substances. Stop spending 3 or 4 hours on your phone every day. Stop spending multiple hours watching nonsense that codes your consciousness with a feeling of anger, injustice, sadness, or punitive kind of energies, news outlets, all kinds of things that just bring you down. Stop doing that. Go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week. Move in a way that revitalizes your body. Take up a new sport. Take up a musical instrument. It's such basic self-development advice, but the reason that it works is that the spiral of complexity loops all the way back round. First self-development video that you ever watch, it's Tony Robbins 101, or maybe it's a popular YouTuber who's talking about 10 habits to improve your life. That advice at the most highest level is still the same advice running all the way through. You can just go on this intellectual complexity kind of spiral arc towards rationalizing the same reason that, oh yeah, I should probably drink, 3, 4, 5 liters of water a day. That you don't need to read dense scientific books to get towards that outcome. You can read the books. I recommend you read the books. Personally, I'm not including too many of these kinds of books in my course. I think it's much better to engage with the beating heart of the person who's experienced trauma, which means going to the emotional angle, which means telling stories and having narratives and hopefully implanting some kind of vision in your mind that once more I will pick up this bucket. If you're spending your day is running around doing bucket management and really trying your best to make sure that not a single drop of trauma energy reaches the floor, and you've got all your systems and all your tools in place, and you're just spending your time playing with the bucket, I know why it feels good. I've been there. But the way to repair the nervous system is not the same way that you regulate the nervous system. You know intuitively what you need to do to feel safe again. You don't need to read books. You don't need to listen to me. Start doing what's already in front of you. Doesn't need to be complex. For most people, it's about substances, energy investments, and the people that we expose ourselves to. You can start to unravel the patterns of the past and realize, they do remind me of my mom, and that reminds me of my punishing school teacher, and that particularly abusive individual in my life reminds me of that other individual who was also very abusive. Those cognitive elements will start to come through, but you can also just make the shifts as a conscious, mature, empowered adult and not spend months delaying changes that can happen quite instantly. I hope this video has been useful. It's been a very roundabout, almost chaotic take on the topic of sensitive nervous systems. There are 3 books that you can read on the topic of trauma healing. I've got so many more videos that are more in-depth and more detailed about certain things. This is all I wanted to do on this video, and I hope it's been useful. If it has been, comment in the comment section, an expansion in a certain direction, let me know. I will do another video that hopefully goes into more detail. We'll see where we want to go with it, but nonetheless, end of the video. There's the next video, and I will see you over there with or without a bucket. Maybe I'll have a mug or a wheelbarrow or some kind of other prop, maybe a live animal, who knows, just make it engaging, because this is YouTube and attention spans are short, which is also a sign of a traumatized nervous system. Anyway, next video is over there.